Good morning, everyone. Today is January 7th, 2021, and I was thinking, what do I want to talk to you about today? Um, Today is it's the day after the Congress of the United States of America has certified the electoral vote of the people for Joe Biden as president of the United States and Kamala Harris as vice president over Donald Trump and Mike Pence, who have maintained that they were cheated out of the U.S. election. I wanted to touch in on this topic just because it feels so salient. It's so present right now, the things that are happening in this country, and it kind of gets to another point that I want to make, which is ultimately that the work that I do, the work that I'm interested in doing, in so many ways is actually non-political, and I'll get into that a little bit more. But there is this element where, because of the work that I do, it's always also political. I want to pick up the story where I left things off yesterday, because I was telling you about my journey through social impact, and the goal there was to tell you about how there are ups and downs within that, and that sometimes even the challenge, or even the goal of staying within the world of social impact itself can be challenging, right? Doing work that is exclusively social impact. What does it mean to be social impact? What isn't social impact? Those are questions that we can talk more about as we move forward in this series. But I'm going to recap that. I want to talk a little bit more about today's events. I want to talk a little bit more about this political piece that I was talking about, where the work is political, but it's not political at the same time for me. And then I want to give you a few insights, things that I've learned from my years and years of doing social impact design work. So just to give you the quick overview of what my journey has looked like, and I don't want to spend too long here, but we can, if you have questions, if you have comments, please leave those and we can dive into those at any point. Down the line. I started off my career designing a wind turbine for people in industrializing nations, and I wanted to create something that was going to improve quality of life for those individuals. I followed this design thinking journey, putting the people that I was designing for at the center of my design process, but then I compromised on that, and I switched my target population to the United States because it was more convenient, it was easier to serve them, and I came up with this idea of providing them with a product that would meet their needs instead. But it turned out that they actually didn't have a need that was big enough to support the business that I was building around that, and that ended up failing. That led to, as I said yesterday, the creation of something that was completely different from that, which was meant to teach me the skills necessary to become an entrepreneur, to actually sell a product for the first time to someone who didn't know me, to actually build a functional website that did something that people would be willing to visit and use, to actually be able to keep my finances for my business in order in a way where it was predictable what was coming, to do a lot of the groundwork, the basic pieces that are needed to run a functional business. So I built this business, starting off by launching this Kickstarter campaign to create these maps. I sold these maps, $15,000 worth of maps, and I used the money from that to buy my own laser cutter and engraver, which led to me setting up a business doing contract manufacturing in the Bay Area. I was doing laser cutting and engraving for businesses, mostly organizations, throughout the Bay who were creating for-profit products. And I was telling myself at the time, I'm helping them create the products that they're using to change the world. But the reality is that most of my customers weren't social impact in nature. They were creating sensors for commercial stores to be able to track the number of customers flowing through their aisles, things like that. I don't consider that social impact, at least not the type of social impact that I want to work on. I'd rather work on things that are directly reducing poverty, or inequality, or improving human health. Those are the things that I consider to be social impact based. So that's what I was working on, and I was working on that for a while, but I continued to think, how can I get back to this vision of really doing social impact? Because there are these stories we tell ourselves in the back of our mind that we use to sustain us, but there's also these other voices in our head that tell us we we know that's not true, right? That um, we know that what we're doing, or the story that we're telling ourselves, isn't always accurate. So after laser cutting and engraving, I was doing that for a while. I was setting that up, and it was becoming successful. It was my first really functional, stable, consistent business, right? And it was a milestone. So I don't want to underplay the value that that offered me in my life, because I was on a journey to learn how to run a business, and I built a business. I had consistent customers who were coming in frequently. I had money that I could predict year over year. I hired my first employee. I remember the first day that I made money off of running the laser, which I owned, which I had purchased through the work that I had done to be able to afford it by building these maps. The laser was being run by the person that I hired, who I was paying for that work. And he came in, and I had shown him how to run that. And so I remember the first time that he started on a job and I walked away, and I was like, this is incredible. Like, I am about to make money for the first time without being the one trading directly my time for the money, right? And we can put a little pin in the time for money piece, and maybe that will come up again when I start talking about politics. But that's it's an important part of my social impact philosophy that probably diverges from a number of other people. Now, after the laser cutting and engraving, I'm doing that for a while, and I'm building this business. I have something that's stable. I've made these leaps where I went from being in my apartment complex bedroom and running an industrial 600-pound laser cutter there, to being in an actual office building, venting the exhaust, properly. And I started thinking, what else can I do? And I recognize that one thing that I've always done and always wanted to do is teach. I've always wanted to continue to share the insights that I've learned. That's what this channel is all about as well, this series, right? I'm teaching and I'm sharing what I've learned. So I began teaching design thinking, teaching this methodology that I had learned and that had become really valuable for me in the Bay Area. And in many situations, design thinking was created as a tool to design better products for-profit entities that weren't focused on social impact. And so the example I often give is, design thinking is really great for designing a better water bottle for elite bicyclists. There's nothing that's super social impact in nature embedded in that. But you would go out to the bicyclists, you'd talk to those bicyclists, you'd learn more about their specific needs, and then you would design something that better met their needs of, I want to go faster, I want it to be lighter, I want to be able to access it without having to reach down and grab it because it reduces my power while I'm holding on to the handlebars. I want to be able to do this and this and this and this. You take all those things into consideration, you create a bunch of models, you test them, you figure out which one was better, and then you could sell those people a better device, right? So this was an incredibly popular thing to be teaching, and I had the opportunity of building another business line teaching that process. So I think one of my first customers was an affiliate of PBS, and then from there, I sort of just began getting my name out there. I was talking to people that I knew, people in my network. And people started referring me to others. So I began showing up, and I would teach these 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour workshops, and really take people through an experience of learning design thinking in a really short amount of time. In whatever amount of time that I had, I would take them through an experience where they would work with a partner or work in a small group to design something. And they would get all the way to this prototyping phase, and we'd be really early stage prototypes. So you're talking construction paper, you're talking popsicle sticks, you're talking things that you can find all around your house, which for anyone who isn't familiar with this process is going to sound like that's fake, that's children's stuff. And in many ways, it is children's stuff. But that's kind of the point. The point of this is that to generate new ideas, to come up with something great, to create something that hasn't been created before, you actually do need to go back to basics and not worry about the polish and the pizzazz behind what you're creating, but create something that represents your idea, demonstrates that, and you can get feedback on that quickly with really low cost, cheap, throwaway materials. Okay, so I start teaching this process, and I'm simultaneously doing I'm playing what I call the pricing game. Right, so I'm learning, what is this worth to people? I'm asking this question, and I'm raising my prices as I go to figure out what I should charge for that. For a lot of social impact innovators, what I found when I've analyzed the work that they do, when I've coached them through this process, is that they do not charge enough to sustain their lives, given where they live and what their expenses are. And that's part of doing those calculations to understand what does it really take to sustain you. But the hourly rate that you would expect to make at a job and the hourly rate that you need to make whenever you are just doing this one thing are different. You cannot live off of the minimum wage only doing that every now and then, right? You can't even live off the minimum wage super well, doing it all the time. That's something worth noting. But if you extrapolate that out, right, what about double the minimum wage? Can you make that only doing it sometimes? Well, it depends on how often the occasional times you're doing it take place, right? So I had to learn that lesson as well as an entrepreneur. What you charge for the engagement is not actually equal to the total amount of hours you spend at the engagement. So I began teaching this process, and after a few years of teaching design thinking, right, I'm at this point I'm ramping up. I'm teaching to everyone. I taught to affiliates of PBS, taught to other organizations that you wouldn't know who they are. I taught to Oracle. I taught to Santander in Spain. I was flown out to Spain for this 3-day master level class that I taught to executives from Santander. And that was focused on improving banking, right? I taught at the U.S. Embassy in Spain. I taught design thinking in so many places to so many different groups. But in 2014, end of 2014, I got to this point where I was just like, is this what I want? I had to go back into that place, and I said, this is great. I have learned how to build three different actually really business lines. One business line around laser cutting and engraving, one business line around this educational offering and figuring out what that's worth. And then I had this other business line, which was, I had been a tutor for years. And so this was a direct me to family sort of business that was actually the foundational income that I had been making, right? So I have now mastered these 3 different business lines, but this question is coming back to me, which is, I said I wanted to be an inventor to create things to improve quality of life. And I don't feel like I'm doing that. And so I said, what is it that I can do to really shift my way away from this sort of commercial, I teach an executive design thinking, they're never going to use it. They're 52 years old. They've been running their business for a long time. They make a bunch of money. This is just a really fun offsite day for them. This is just a fun day for them to go learn something and not have to be focused on the work that they actually need to be doing. It's not something that's going to change anyone's life. That's not what I wanted to spend my life investing in. So as I was thinking about it, I thought back to a project I did in college. And this project was to design a prosthetic for an individual who had his leg amputated below the knee. That project was something that I did toward the end of my college career, but it made an impact on me, right? Because one of the things that it taught me was, one, it gave me an opportunity to meet an incredible individual, but 2, it took me into his life. And what I learned from that experience was that even people, when people face challenges in life, when the world isn't designed for them, even when they've learned to cope with that, when they've learned to deal with that, when they have all sorts of adaptations, there can still, after 20 years, 30 years, be these moments where the transition between the solutions they've come up with and the fact that the world wasn't designed for them, the transition into a new space still has friction. Right? So for this individual, for him, he had figured out how to live his life with a below the knee amputation in almost every situation that he needed. He had multiple prosthetics. He continued to live his life to the fullest. But there was still this challenge around showering, especially as he aged, right? So getting in and out of the shower was a challenge because the prosthetic that he would use to go into the bathroom and get all set up was not a waterproof prosthetic that he could take into the shower at the same time. And the transfer between standing outside of the tub to standing in the tub with only one leg was a challenging and dangerous experience. So my team and we designed a prosthetic for him to address that. As I was thinking about that, I thought, here's who I want to teach. I want to teach design thinking to a population who I think will benefit from it more than anyone else. It's not CEOs who are 52 years old who've already figured out the processes they're going to use for the rest of their career, and who may or may not ever care about what I have to say. It's probably people on the other end of the spectrum, from that age group. I want to teach people who are going to use this. I want to teach people, and what I want to teach them is I want to teach them something so profound that it changes their trajectory in life. And so I came up with this idea to create the Design the Future program. And what we do is we teach high school students how to design and manufacture products for and with people with disabilities in 1 week. And I had this idea for it, and I said, I think I can do this. And I remember as I was crafting it, I began to advertise for it, to talk to people about it. And the biggest question was, do you think it's possible? Do you think they can do it? Do you think that a group of individuals in 1 week can actually change the world, can actually change the life of another person? And my answer was yes, but I had never proven that that was actually possible with anyone, including with myself. I never did it that fast either myself, but I had done it before. I had built things like this before. So I launched the Design the Future program, and I launched it. And one of the things happened for me was I built this program, and I didn't have anyone with me when I first started, but it began collecting people because they believed in the vision of what I wanted to build. I think in some ways they believed in me, but more than anything, they believed in the vision behind what I wanted to do. And that's another just lesson for social impact innovators, is that, your vision really does matter. The clarity of your vision, the ambition of your vision, the certainty of what you want to do is really important as you set out to move down a path where people are going to come and support you rather than just opposing you at every step of the way. So I can go more into the Design the Future program at some point, but basically launched that program in 2015, 14 students the first year. And it was a success. We had 3 different project partners. They had 3 different products, and it was just a phenomenal set of outcomes. Which again, that's another story for another day. And what that did was that led to consistent years of running that program, running it at Stanford University, expanding across the country. This year we're running it as a digital program. It's going to be in its 6/7th year because we skipped last year because of COVID. But it's going to be a digital program. We're revamping it in a number of ways to make it so that kids from all over the world can join, project partners from all over the world can join, and they're going to design apps instead of products. So I'm super excited about that. And if you're interested, actually, the application is open right now. You can go to youdesignthefuture.com, and I will, maybe I'll create a little thing here for you real quick so that you can see that. You can go to that and sign up. You can apply. You can apply if you're a high school student. So that brings me to the final piece, which is basically from that I made a transition, and I said, this teaching piece is really important. This is something that I want to do. What I want to start doing though is I want to start consulting. I want to start working with organizations to actually address deep-seated, deeply rooted, entrenched social impact issues. I want to do that on the long term. I don't want to just work with them for a day. I don't want to just teach them these methods. I want to work with them to actually address these issues. And so I shifted over and I began focusing on, hey, I do long-term consulting for organizations who are trying to deepen their social impact. And that was the point where DC Design became what is its current and new, current and ongoing stable business model, which is that we are a social impact strategy and design consulting firm that works with governments, foundations, and nonprofits to reduce poverty, inequality, and poor human health. We focus on the communities who haven't been designed for, the ones that have been left behind, who face the biggest challenges from the flaws in America's social systems. And one of the communities that we focus, particularly hard on is the Black community in America, because one of the aspects of social impact design also is you have to understand where you have outsized power and where you don't? And where do you have the ability to understand or to make an impact that others would have a harder time doing that? Design the Future was an example of that. I combined teaching design thinking with mechanical engineering education for high school students, and my background in tutoring and my background in education overall, and all these pieces in a way that was pretty unique to me. And DC Design and our focus represents a lot of that as well. So, we're a team of 6 that's growing, but that's sort of the journey that I've gone on. I said I wanted to touch on some other events, and this live is going for quite a while so far, but I will quickly touch in on those. What we're witnessing in America right now is a time that I believe we will hear about in the history books. I am not I'm not running for office. I haven't wanted to run for office in quite a long time. I think there's so much work that needs to be done by people who aren't running for office. And I also don't have a party affiliation. So I'm going to put those things out there right now. But my work is political because, as I told you, we're working on poverty, inequality. We're working on issues of that really affect people's lives. And the government is almost always has some role in those. As I look at the world today, I can say plainly to you that I as someone who grew up in the conservative bastion of America in Texas, and who then moved to the liberal bastion of America, which was the San Francisco Bay Area, who finds himself aggressively in the center because I believe so much in aspects of the values that are traditionally held on each end of this spectrum. There's this pull yourself up from the bootstraps, like what are you going to do when the chips are down mentality that comes through at its best, or at their best, I should say, when conservatives really are in tune with what that means. And there's this understanding of how environment affects our lives that is deeply rooted in the more liberal, progressive mindsets that exist within this country, and a compassion that comes from that. And I see so much value in these two sides that when we shift too far to one side or the other, what inherently happens is that we start to forget or not see the value that the other group is bringing to the table, right? And they demonize one another. And so I sit in the middle of that. All of that said, as someone who sits in the middle and who sees those values, and who loves people who are Republican, who loves people who are Democrat, and who knows people deeply who are from both of those groups, and who carries characteristics of both of those groups, I think it was 100% the right thing for Donald Trump to not be reelected to the presidency of the United States. And the reason for that is the level of vitriol and chaos that he brought to America. Donald Trump is not a genius politician to me, but he is a very intelligent marketer. As a business person who is studying marketing and who has studied marketing, Donald Trump uses the devices of marketing super effectively. And some of those that he uses are division of people. The goal is not to attract everyone. The goal is to weed out the people who are actually on your side. He creates common enemies, which is something that is a powerful device as well. He creates an environment where people want to be in his group, and he controls the lever of that. And by controlling that, he's able to control how people respond and react to things. But the way that was employed by him over the course of 4 or 5 years, I think has been really, really challenging, really, really problematic for America. What I want to say about this loss by Trump and the Republicans overall is that it is a historic and resounding defeat. There have been so many conversations about like the election was stolen and all those things. Those are all a smokescreen, because the reality is he's the first president in 28 years, almost 3 decades, to lose re-election. He's only one of 10 presidents to ever lose re-election. And he is, I think, one of 5 presidents ever to lose re-election and then to also lose the House and the Senate at the same time. And I don't know if those other two, actually, the other four, actually had 100% control of those, right? Had a majority in the others. I don't want to dwell on that too long, but what I want to say is that I have hope for where we're going. But I also want to leave this message. What government plays an important role in what we do. It plays an important role in creating a society that is functional and stable. It plays an important role in making sure that the mechanisms we put in place can be repeated and carried out in a predictable way down the line. I think that's one of the reasons why this change in government is going to be valuable, is because there is a lack of predictability from the government and from the highest office in the land. But what I want to say also is that government is a helper. Government rarely solves the problem. And this is a piece where I've had these conversations with people who are further on the liberal side of the spectrum, and they sometimes don't see that, don't feel that way, right? But my work interacting with these systems is that one of the biggest challenges with government-run systems or purely government-based systems, right, is that they lack the customization necessary to directly help populations who are made up of individuals with different needs. And my example would be, for example, the foster care system. The foster care system is a system. It has a set of protocols in place, and it overall helps ensure that kids are not maintaining an existence in abusive environments, and that they're able to go to other places to live, and that they're not sleeping on the street. But it does not cater as well as it could to the individual needs of individual kids, to ask the question, what would it take for this kid to reach their fullest potential? What investment in this child would I need to make to get there, right? The job of asking that question, of holding government's feet to the fire, of making sure whatever system it is, whether it's government or it's nonprofit or it's for-profit or whatever, who's taking care of people, the job of making sure that that happens is the people. And so that's my first point, is that government is an amplifier. And it is not the one that I look to say, this is going to be this election, this group of senators and congressmen and elected officials are going to be the ones who solve this problem that we've had for a really, really, really long time. I've always found that it takes concerted, massive effort from the people in order to make sure that the right changes are made, that the right institutions are put in place, that those institutions and things are maintained in the first place. Government will cut the budget, and all of a sudden the program that everyone thought was going to be there for a really long time falls apart. And so there is a cooperation there, but I just wanted to put that out there. As I think about a new set of elected officials, I think about that as these are people who will be receptive to the types of changes that need to take place. These are people who will put in place some of the institutions that will be helpful, but by no means do I believe that they themselves will solve all these problems. The second point that I'm going to close with here is that the only way that we will actually address some of the poverty-related and long-term and ongoing issues in America is if more individuals get involved. I am 100% convinced that that is true. More individual people need to be involved in addressing the issues in their own community, because of the level of customization necessary to really meet the needs of a real person. The gentleman that you meet on the street corner in your town who is homeless, the government solution, even the local government solution, isn't necessarily going to meet his needs. The question is, what does he really need to get to where he wants to get to? That's a question that an individual can answer, or a small group of individuals can answer. And so that's why I believe so wholeheartedly in the work that we do, teaching young people, teaching adults how to create social change. Because you, who's watching this right now, you could be the one who answers that question by walking alongside that person you met. But what it would require is a different approach. Not driving past them, not just giving money. It would require conversation and relationship. And conversation and relationship is something that only comes from real human beings. The third is it is 100% possible. I sort of embedded it in what I just said, for one person to change the world. It is 100% possible for one person to change the world, because I want to give you, I want to leave you today with the definition of what it means to change the world. To change the world is to improve the quality of life of one person, one other person. There are these ripple effects, right, to what we do that ripple throughout time. What we do for one person changes how they think about things, changes how they act in the world, changes how they treat other people, which ripples out and ripples out and ripples out. And so we're creating constant ripples. So the fundamental unit of positive social change, right, which is measured by the people whose lives have been improved, right, and by how much those lives have been improved, the fundamental unit of that is improving the life of one other human being. And as I already told you, right, if it's the individual on the corner who's homeless in your town, who you've maybe never had an extended conversation with, changing our behavior around that, I think, is going to be the most promising way for us to really begin to address some of these major issues that we have. What you will learn from that conversation is these other pieces that I mentioned, that there is an entanglement between his situation and the systems that are maintained by people, which are bigger, more political systems, our school system and our housing system and our educational system and which is our school system and our our foster care system, et cetera. You'll start to see that if you have enough of those conversations, those systems are spitting out results over and over, and a lot of those results lead to poverty for people. But still, the fundamental unit of change within that is sort of starting with that place, and then once you learn to create change there, you can begin to scale that up, as we've done at DC Design, and say, okay, well, I have all these insights from people on the ground. How do we alter the system so it's not putting out the same outcomes as it was putting out before? Okay. So if you're interested in that, if you're interested in learning more about that, I'm going to give you a couple of things that you can do right now. One, you can click the like, follow, subscribe button wherever you are. Follow this show. I have a page on Facebook. There's a page on Twitter, _ Durell Coleman _ on Twitter. You can follow my Instagram at Durell Coleman. You can follow any of those things, right? So that's one thing, and you can keep watching the series. The second thing you can do is that on dcdesignltd.com, we have dcdesignltd.com. We have launched DC Design University, and DC Design University teaches you the concepts that I've been talking about on this show. How do you really do these things, right? I can go into stories about how I've done them. I can talk a little bit about the frameworks, but how do you implement them? Do you want to have a step-by-step guide to actually making that happen? Go there and check out DC Design University. You'll see some of the offerings we have. We've got a course, for example, called Design Thinking Fundamentals for Social Change that helps you create change in the life of 1 to 3 people and proves to you that you have the ability to change the world. It's a foundational step, because from there you can begin to build systems. You can begin to replicate those outcomes. You can end up changing the life directly of millions of people. But you have to know how, and that's what we're here to teach you. All right, that's what I've got for today. Thank you for sticking with me. This was a longer live than normal, but I look forward to talking